He did make a comment recently that has everybody up in arms. He talks about clearing out the entire Gaza Strip of all of its people and moving them to either Jordan or Egypt. Listen to him on Air Force One make this comment.
I'm talking to General El-Sisi tomorrow, sometime I believe, and I'd like Egypt to take people, and I'd like Jordan to take people. I mean, you're talking about probably 1.5 million people, and we just clean out that whole thing. It's it's over the centuries. It's had many conflicts that site, and I don't know. It's something has to happen, but it's literally a demolition site right now. Almost everything's demolished, and people are dying there. So I'd rather get involved with some of the Arab nations and build housing at a different location where they can maybe live in peace for a change.
Temporarily, or would they
It could be either. It could be temporarily, could be long term.
Okay, so he says, I know it's kind of hard to hear with all the airplane noise, but he says, I'd like Egypt to take people. I'd like Jordan to take people. He says, we're talking about 1.5 million people, just clean out the whole thing. There's been a lot of conflict over the centuries, many conflicts. It's literally a demolition site right now. People are dying there. I'd rather get involved and work with other Arab nations and build housing other places, and maybe they could live in peace for a change. And then he was asked, would that be temporary or permanent? He said, could be either or. So, couple of things on this. First of all, that is called ethnic cleansing, and it's a war crime. This would be nothing more than what the Israelis want. This was music to the Israelis' ears, the Zionist ears. They want that land for themselves. So they want nothing more than to just clear out the Palestinians. I mean, that's what they were trying to do. They were just trying to kill them all. And what Trump is saying is, well, rather than you killing them, why don't we just relocate them? And yeah, the Israelis are like, fine, good, relocate them somewhere far away. They were trying to get him to take them to Indonesia, but that's because Indonesia is a Muslim country. But Indonesia, that's not an Arab country, or there would be nothing. They would just ship them off to an island in Indonesia. Kind of strange. But the other question about this, so for one, it's ethnic cleansing on its surface. Two, 1.5 million people is what he's saying. Did he just inadvertently admit the real death toll in Gaza? Because what happened to the other, they originally told us there was 2.3 million people in Gaza. That was the original population. Anywhere from 2.1 to 2.3 million was kind of the estimate on the numbers of the people in Gaza. We know about 100,000 fled that were accepted into other places during the war, Egypt or other places, Lebanon. So what happened to the other 500 to 700,000 people? I mean, what happened to 500 to 700,000 people? The estimates from other outlets that have been analyzing the conflict, the official number has always been about 45,000. And they've kept it at that, as we've seen bombing after bombing and hospitals being destroyed and schools being destroyed. And we see all of these images of people being killed. And yet they've kept saying that the number has maintained at 45,000 deaths is what they were kind of averaging. And they've been saying this for a year now. And it's just unbelievable. So other outlets that analyze conflict say, no, the number is probably in the hundreds of thousands. And now you have Trump saying we're talking about 1.5 million people. So did they kill 500,000 people? Did they kill that many people? I would think that's a real possibility. I would think that a lot of people died, not just from being bombed, but also starved, malnourished, disease, lack of care, lack of medical care. So what happened to all of the people? First of all, this plan isn't going to work because Egypt and Jordan have already categorically rejected it. Egypt has said, they released this statement actually saying Egypt upholds the principles and frameworks of the political resolution to the Palestinian issue. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs affirms Egypt's commitment to the principles and frameworks of the political, that's a retype. It emphasizes that the Palestinian cause remains central in the Middle East and that its resolution lies in ending the occupation, restoring the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people, and laying the foundation for stability in the region. So they're saying, no, we have to go back to the border. We have a two-state solution. It's already been laid out. That's what we need to be going to, and that's what needs to happen. This is a bigger issue. Now, some people might say, well, why won't these other Arab nations just take the Palestinian people? You know, they don't want these Palestinians. I hear this all the time. They don't want these Palestinians. They're such parasites. Nobody wants to take them. Everybody keeps rejecting them. People are saying this and they don't understand the conflict. Egypt, at one point, Israel stole Egypt's land. They took the entire Sinai Peninsula. They were forced to give it back by the United States when we actually, for once, strong-armed Israel. But Israel tried to take that land. Israel believes, let's show the greater Israel. Do we have the greater Israel? Do we have an image of that? Let's see if we can show that up here. So this is the Greater Israel Project, and a lot of the far-right fanatics believe that this is the true land of the Israelites, that this is the land God promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that this is their land, this is what they deserve, and that eventually they will conquer all of this land. And they've been pretty blatant in saying that. So the other Arab nations know it doesn't end with Palestine. This is not actually an issue of the Palestinians are terrorists, we can't live with them, just take them. They know that once the Palestinian issue is no longer an issue for the Israelis will turn their sights on the others. They'll start going after the Sinai Peninsula. They've already started going after Lebanon and Syria. They're going to be taking. They're eventually going to destabilize the Jordanian monarchy. I could guarantee you that at some point, Jordan will become an unstable country and Israel will say, we can't live next to these terrorists in Jordan. We have to just start taking the land for our own security. It always comes out to, for our own security, we have to take this land. So all of these other countries are fully aware of this, and they know that it doesn't end with the Palestinians, that even if they all took all the Palestinian people and they absorbed them, which many of them already have, that Israel will just start chipping away at Lebanon. They want, in particular, they really want to go vertically. So they will eventually spread into Jordan and Syria, and they'll take all of that. But what they really want to do is get the entire sea. They want that whole sea, and they want access to the Red Sea. So they want, which they have a little bit, but they want all of it. So they're going to want that whole Sinai Peninsula, which goes all the way to the Red Sea. And they're also going to want all of Lebanon and that territory of Syria in the north. And they're going to keep inching their way until they take all of the sea land. And then they'll start making their way west. And they've already destabilized Iraq. You know, they could already take a big chunk there if they wanted to. So that's the whole plan. I mean, this is not even a secret in Israel. They fly this flag. You'll see this in Israel places. There's a lot of IDF soldiers who have this map on their on a patch on their shoulder. This is what they want to do. So they know that. But I want to say this about, and Jordan also said no to relocation, by the way. Jordan also said, you know, no way, sorry, we're not taking them, not going to happen. And again, it's not because they just don't like Palestinians. Jordan has lots of Palestinians. The Queen of Jordan is a Palestinian. It's not that they hate Palestinians at all. They just understand that this conflict is a land grab. This is not really about, we just can't live with these neighbors, and that they would be next. Jordan would definitely be next. But let's talk about the, also, there was another one here. There was then rumors that Trump then turned to Albania. You know, we heard about the Indonesia. Then he goes to Jordan and Egypt. They said, no way. And then there was talk that he maybe went to the Albanians and said, well, then you take them. And the Albanian prime minister has denied that. So if you've heard that rumor, they're saying that's not true at all. I understand. So on the surface, we can all get very upset with Trump and his comment calling for the clearing out of the land and say, see, there it is. He's working on behalf of the Israelis. He took about $250 million from pro-Israel sources. 100 million of that came from Miriam Adelson. Another 150 came from a bunch of other sources who are all advocating for essentially the greater Israel. They're advocating for eliminating the Palestinians, annexing the West Bank, clearing out Gaza. This is what they want. And Trump is now doing what his donors want. And that's obviously a huge possibility. There's another possibility there, and it kind of comes from some of his statements. You know, he says the place is a demolition site. They've been at war for centuries. You know, maybe they should just build somewhere else and live at peace and live in peace for a change. I can understand this coming from a place that's not ethnic cleansing and genocidal. I once had this thought myself, and I think a lot of people have this thought, and I know a lot of Palestinians have had this thought also. That's why a lot of Palestinians have left Palestine. They live here in the United States. They live in other places. They live in Jordan. They live in other places because they did not want to live in war anymore. They did not want their children to grow up with fewer opportunities, living under occupation, and they made a different choice. I know lots of Palestinians who have made that choice. So it's not a far-fetched thinking. It's not far-fetched thinking to say maybe people should just go somewhere else and live a happy, peaceful life. This is something the Israelis say all the time, but they're saying it because they just want them gone. They're not saying it because they genuinely care about the health and welfare of these people. They're saying it for their own selfish reasons. But when I was over in Palestine and I was touring around in the West Bank, and I saw especially the refugee camps, and there's all these camps that are set up, and this is the people that were expelled during the Nakba, and their families went to these refugee sites. And at first they were tents, and then eventually housing was built and more permanent places were built, but they're still considered refugee camps, and they're very poor. And these Palestinians don't have to live in these refugee camps. They could certainly go and live somewhere else, but they're very much holding on to, what happened to their family, the Nakba, the treachery that happened to them. And I have to say that my thought was, while I was there, my thought was, but why do this to yourself? Why stay here and fight for this? And you're just giving up your future. You're giving up your children's future. Like, maybe just go live in Ramallah, build up a life there and not live in this refugee camp. Or maybe go and, if you can live somewhere else, maybe go live somewhere else. And they just kept saying to me, Kim, you just don't get it. They kept arguing with me about, you don't get it. You don't get it. And I do understand why they're fighting. They want that land. This is a war, and the war is of existence for the Palestinians. It's their right to exist on that land, the land that was theirs before these settlers came and started aggressively taking it from them. But my thought, and like a lot of Palestinians who've left, is you may have the right. It's like, you might have the right of way as a pedestrian crossing the street, but do you really want to do you want to prove it by walking in front of a drunk driver who doesn't see you and ends up hitting you? Like, do you want to who ends up suffering more just because you were right? You were right, but now you're suffering major consequences, even though you're right. I just don't know if there's a point in that. And so I think, when Trump says things like, look, the place is a demolition site and people are dying and they've been at war this whole time and maybe they just want to live in peace. I understand that feeling. A lot of people have that feeling. They understand the Palestinians are right, but they also think, but just let it go now. Let it go. You've lost. These people are insane terrorists and you're never going to beat them because they're freaking crazy. That would be of course, Trump's not saying that. Of course, he's not going to come out and be like, the Israelis are nuts and you'll never be able to live next to these people because you're living next to serial killers, basically, who will stop at nothing to kill you. But that's kind of a choice you have to make, right? Like, if a serial killer lived next door to me, and I would want them to leave, but if they're not going to go anywhere, I probably would just pack up and leave. Because I just don't want to, that's not a battle I want to fight. So I think, I understand, there's two ways to look at the Trump comment. One way, which might be very much more the legitimate, meaningful, what he was really truly meaning, which is clear it out, give the Israelis what they want, and let me start developing the land and turning it into the Singapore of the Middle East. Very well might be that. But it also might come from a place of, or maybe even a mixture of both, of, maybe it's just, accept you've lost. Accept that you've lost this. The Israelis are not stopping at anything. You've lost, and it's time to just rebuild your lives somewhere else and stop the bloodshed, stop the wars. These bastards beat you, and you just sometimes have to accept defeat. And I can understand that sentiment. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's the right thing. I don't think that the Palestinians should lose their land or be kicked off of their land. But I understand, when you've been defeated, that it might be in the best interest of you and your future to accept that and move on. But the other issue is these other countries won't take them. And it's not because they're parasites and nobody wants the Palestinians. It's because they know that they're next. If the Palestinian issue is no longer a question, They'll move on to the Lebanese question. They'll move on to the Syrian question. They'll move on to the Jordanian question. And they'll especially pick on Jordan because they'll say this was never a country. We literally just made it up out of nowhere. I mean, that's what the Israelis use about Palestine all the time. I mean, the whole entire Middle East was carved up and created. And they'll be like, well, Jordan really was carved up and created just out of nothing. And so that's ours. It's ours. God said so. It's totally ours. Meanwhile, the Gazans are not leaving. They're wanting to stay in their homeland. And now we're seeing thousands and thousands and thousands of Gazans heading back north into Gaza since the ceasefire deal has been implemented and they've been allowed back into the north. All of these people are going to Gaza City. Gaza City was the most populated area of Gaza. It's in the north. It's been completely demolished. But nonetheless, all of these people are marching back, returning home. This video, I believe, came from, do we have the Twitter account of, this is Abu Bakr Abed, great journalist in Palestine. I recommend you follow him. He's been showing a lot of videos from Palestine. He's been interviewing a lot of people. He's a native English speaker. He has like an English accent, but he is Palestinian journalist. So definitely follow him, but he's got some great footage. I think we also have some more images of the Gazan people look at all these people going back to the north. All of these displaced people. I mean, have you ever seen anything like this in your life? Crazy. Okay, let's move on to the hostage deal. So 4 IDF soldiers were released. This is Karina Reeve, Daniela Gilboa, Nama Levy, Leary Albag, and they were seen, this is them right before they're being released. They're standing next to the Hamas people. They're smiling, they're waving. You should see the excuses people are making online for this. They're like, oh, you know what happened? I read one Twitter thread where the guy says, I bet they had babies. They got pregnant. They were raped. They got pregnant. They had babies. And Hamas is keeping their babies hostage. And they have to act like this or they know their babies are going to be hurt. that was like a theory that a lot of people were like, yeah, that's what happened. That's exactly why they're smiling. I mean, I'm sure they're smiling and I'm sure they were told to do this. I can't imagine they were really doing that on their own accord. But to go through this whole fantasy of they were definitely raped and their children, and then the comments about the babies, then you had all these crazy Israelis commenting about that's fine, the baby should be killed. And then some other Israelis were like, but wait a minute, they're Jewish babies. And then others were saying, no, they're not. They're the spawn of Satan. If they were raped by Hamas, those babies should just die. I mean, it's just insanity. The Israelis are totally and completely insane. There was a 5th, these are IDF soldiers that were captured and they were released after all of this time in captivity. You can see that they are not skinny, malnourished. There was also some crazy conspiracies going on saying that they were starved to death. So not only were they raped and pregnant and the babies are being held hostage, is what the Israelis are trying to say, but Israeli commentators, I'm not saying Israel themselves, like the government, but just people online, and these things are going viral and people are like, yeah, that's what happened. And then they're saying that these girls were starved to death and malnourished and that Hamas somehow undertook some state-of-the-art, like as if they have this there, state-of-the-art protocols to fatten them back up and make them healthy right before they were released. That they were able to like rapidly make them healthy again once they figured out that the ceasefire deal was in and these girls were going to be released. In a matter of days, they were able to fatten them back up. Okay. So a 5th female soldier was supposed to be released. Wasn't supposed to be released with these girls, but there was one that was in their unit, in the same unit. And she is still in Gaza. And some of the soldiers asked to remain in Gaza. They didn't want to be released. A couple of them wanted to stay behind with the other one who's still there. And that was denied, obviously, and the 4 were released, and the one other in their unit is still there. But this might answer the question about the one hostage that caused the crisis, the ceasefire crisis. The ceasefire deal almost fell apart because Israel claimed that Hamas had violated the ceasefire agreement by not releasing one hostage, Arbel Yehud, who is a civilian, not one of these soldiers, But a civilian who was supposed to be released, she was captured along with her partner. Her partner, I believe, is still in Gaza, and she was supposed to be released and was not released. So Israel says, you violated the deal. You're supposed to give us all of our civilians, and you started giving us soldiers before the civilians. We don't know why Hamas did not release Arbel. The Israelis then accused them of she's probably dead. So the Palestinians released this proof of life video. Let's watch a little bit of this. This is Arbel Yehud.
25 לראשון 2025. קוראים לי ארבל יהוד, תעודת זהות שלי 315 369.
Oops.
I'm here
What happened
inside
there? Oh,
Lebanon.
sorry about that. What happened to her? There. Okay. So anyway, so there she is. She says the date, she says her name, she says her birth date and all of this. And this is the proof of life. So the questions are, why was she not released? One of the answers is that, well, she wasn't held by Hamas. She was held by Islamic Jihad, which is a different organization, and they had to work that out. But those two organizations, they work together when it comes to the ceasefire and all of these things. So I don't know if that one holds up. I wonder if she asked to stay the same way that the soldiers asked to stay with their one soldier who is still there. I'm curious if she asked to stay behind because maybe her partner is still there, or she's looking after somebody, or she's there with people. But we do know now that some of the hostages have asked to stay hostages for the reason of staying with others and not wanting to leave them behind. So there's a possibility there. But anyway, Israel claimed that the ceasefire deal was violated. They then prevented all those thousands of Palestinians. They prevented them from going back north. They actually started killing some of them who tried to go across the border when they thought they were allowed to, because that was per the ceasefire agreement. Israel started killing them. I don't know how that's not considered a violation of the ceasefire agreement. And finally, then when Hamas released, or when Islamic Jihad or whoever released this video, this proof of life video of Arbel Yehud, Israel then, and they promised that they would have her out by Thursday. Then Israel said, all right, fine, all of the Gazans can start returning north. So there was kind of a crisis there that really tested the limits of the ceasefire. But it really just came down to Israel saying, you didn't give us one of the people, you gave us other people. We don't like that. We're going to start killing your people. That's their response. Like, you didn't give us the one person. And so because you didn't trade us this hostage, we're going to kill your people. That's their response. I mean, they're maniacs. Israel has continuously violated the ceasefire over and over again. This is a report saying that all the times that Israel has been violating the ceasefire, not only in Gaza, but also in Lebanon. So saying here that Israel has not allowed the return of displaced Palestinians to the northern Gaza. That was because of the Israeli captive Arbel Yehud. They figured that out. That one was fine. But also they say that the seven Israeli captives have so far been released. Let's see here. Hold on. Let me move on to, I guess this one doesn't have, it did have, I guess maybe they've updated this, but let's go on to Lebanon. They were the one that I had originally, the story, it had all of the lists of times they'd been killing lots of people, even despite the ceasefire. Kids have been killed. 2-year-old was shot in the head the other day. I don't know how these are not violations of the ceasefire. Here is journalist Craig Murray. He's in Lebanon, and he is showcasing how the Israelis have been violating the ceasefire with Lebanon as well. Watch this.
I'm here inside Lebanon on the day that Israel is supposed to complete its withdrawal from the country, according to the ceasefire agreement. They have not withdrawn. Netanyahu has said they will not withdraw, but Lebanese civilians are trying to return to their homes. And all over southern Lebanon, the Israelis have been massacring unarmed civilians trying to return to their homes. The latest count we have is 41 people shot and injured, 4 people dead. And these are just people trying to go home. And this is after the ceasefire deal finished, and Israel today is meant to have left. And they're not only still here, they are massacring people. And this is the city of Hiam, which is the largest place that Israel actually managed to occupy during the conflict. And here they've just detonated everything in the city. This is not bombing, this is detonation. We've driven right through the city and we've probably seen, I would estimate, 1,000 destroyed homes. And that's just what we've seen personally. And this must be what Gaza looks like. It's just extraordinary. I'm really angry to see the level of destruction. We saw a small toddler looking in disbelief at his destroyed home a moment ago, being comforted by his family. This is a microcosm of Gaza, I know, but it really makes you feel it.
So, Israel's been violating the ceasefire, and they're also, looking forward to being able to resume their bombing campaign. They keep saying that this is just temporary. It's just temporary. All of this is just temporary. We're going to keep coming after you. And maybe that's why Trump is saying something like, hey, maybe just relocate, because they're not going to stop. These people are genocidal maniacs. He's got to be thinking that, even if he's not saying it. He's got to be thinking it. All right, we got to play this other video for you. This one has been making the rounds. This video actually comes from earlier last year. I think it was from March of last year, but it's just making the rounds because it's just the insanity of it. But this is one of the former hostages. She was held for 54 days by Hamas, Moran Stella Yanai. She was, Israel has continuously said there was all these rape victims, and they've never produced a single rape victim. It's always been stories from somebody who says they saw, or they heard that they heard of somebody who saw it, and a lot of them have been debunked. Moran Stella Yanai explains what rape is and how she was raped. Watch this.
So it's not only sexual, it's also violent.
What did happen?
For me, it was more violence. It's like when you move from house to house, you need to be examined to see if you're not hiding something on you. It's a really necessary test, as they explain it to you. And I always try to explain to people that rape is a really big word, okay? It's not only the act. Even when a guy stands in the front of your door and you sit down and he's staring at you for 10 minutes straight,
It's power.
5-6 times a day, every day, for 54 days. Trust me, that's a rape.
That's rape? Being stared at is rape? Well, then I think a lot of us have been rapists. I think many of us have stared at lots of people for a variety of reasons. I mean, this is absurd to say that's a rape. Staring at me 5-6 times a day, watching me, that's rape. I mean, this is so they used the rape narrative. And the reason why this is so outrageous is because, for one, because it's an outrageous redefinition of what rape is. But two, this is outrageous because they literally justified massacring children because of this. I mean, this was the excuse. It was, well, our women were raped. And then she comes out and says, I had violence against me. And then the interviewer for the BBC asks, in what way? And she says, well, I was moved around from location to location. Yeah, I got moved around. And then the guy stared at me and he raped, and that was rape. The staring was rape. I mean, this is, in their minds, what about all the Palestinian prisoners who were actually raped in the anus with electric rods? I mean, what do you call that? If staring is rape, what was that? I would like to know what that's called. So the absurdity of the narratives of the justification, I mean, there was definitely a lot of bad things that happened. There's been a lot of, October 7th, there was, of course, bad things that happened. A lot of the dead Israelis from October 7th were from their own government. That's obvious now. We know that Hamas did not have the capability to destroy those cars. You've seen the cars, you've seen the destruction, and you know for certain that, for one, the destruction of those cars, what does that look like to you? That looks a lot like Gaza now looks, right? That's from Israeli, that's Israeli ability. That's not Hamas military capabilities. They don't have the capability to do anything like that. So we know that a lot of these Israelis that died, at least half of them, died at the hands of their own government. Hostages inside of Gaza have also died mainly at the hands of their own government. And they used all of that to then justify the total massacring of the Palestinian people, and they want nothing more than just get rid of them. But had to play that clip for you just because it's making the rounds, and it's absolutely insane. Thanks for watching this clip from the full Kim Iversen Show. If you want to watch the full show, visit KimIversonShow.com. The show airs every Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Again, it's at KimIversonShow.com. See you there.